Trying to keep.
It's 8 o'clock, called the meeting of the Finance Administration Committee meeting to order. Melissa?
Keith Fair,
Here.
Steve Brunner,
Here.
Tom Wall,
Here.
John Galvin,
Here.
and Dave Racer.
Here.
Public comment. Hearing no public comment, we'll move on. Phyllis, you want to do the audit now? Is that on the agenda?
That is Nick Weaver from Herbine.
Nick Weaver, welcome from her.
Thank you very much. So I'll give an overview of the, very high level overview of the audit results for the 2022 year. And Phyllis, you can actually click ahead to slide 3, which will give a little bit of just overall background of the audit and the standards that it's conducted under. So we conduct under generally accepted auditing standards, and the basis of accounting that's presented here is the modified cash basis, which is the acceptable method under DCED reporting. And our responsibilities as auditors is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement, either due to fraud or error, and then issue an auditor's report that includes our opinion on those matters. So the next slide will go over what our auditor's opinion was, and it was an unmodified opinion under those standards, which is a clean opinion from an independent auditor. Now looking into the numbers, general fund highlights. So overall revenues came in $771,000 under budget, which is a 5.4% variance. Some of the highlights there for the reasons for that variance is other taxes was actually over budget by $453,000. The main component here is mercantile taxes were $370,000 over, with good economic spending conditions in 2022. The biggest variances that you'll see is under intergovernmental revenues, which was about 1.6 million dollars under, and that's because it included RAPP grant revenues of $1 million, as well as other anticipated awards for the Public Works Facility project, which were not received during the 2022 year. Being on the cash basis with timing of everything, it's pretty difficult to budget when things will actually occur, especially when you're dealing with other governments and funding. Moving down, charges for services was $240,000 over, which was due to higher building permit activity, specifically $100,000 relating to engineering reimbursements. And within the other revenue categories, it's a little bit higher this year. You had a couple new items with $56,000 of pension forfeitures. Those were previous contributions from the borough that came back during the 2022 year, as well as $76,000 related to the prior year flexible spending arrangement reconciliation. On the expenditure side, those were 18% under budget in total, which was about $3 million. General government, $263,000 under, some savings in engineering as well as executive wages. Then the main one that stands out is Public Works, Highway and Streets. That was $1.9 million under. Those are just general delays in various projects, the Green Light Go projects, culvert pipe, stormwater, and some street and sidewalk repair projects that were also they occurred but came in under budget. Culture and Recreation was other large variance of $684,000 with the pedestrian bridge project replacement on hold. Then lastly, moving down to the other financing sources, we did have $460,000 for sale of capital assets related to the aerial scope fire truck. So in total for the 22 year, the borough had budgeted for a use of fund balance in the general fund of the $1,574,000. The actual result was a surplus of $1,189,000. Moving on to the next slide, the borough does report one special revenue fund, the State Highway Aid Fund, which is liquid fuels. Nothing really significant there. Overall for the year, there was a $29,000 use of the State Highway Aid funds with expenditures for street lighting, line painting, and winter maintenance supplies, very consistent with what has occurred in prior years, and that brought the ending fund balance in that fund to $91,000. So this slide here looks at the general fund as well as the proprietary water, sewer, and refuse funds, looking at the ending fund balance over a 5-year period just to give you a little trend information. So looking at the general fund, that fund balance increased quite substantially the past few years. It was 1.6 million in 21 and 1.2 in 22. Partially contributing to that was the 1.1 million in ARP funds that was received in the past 2 years that was utilized just as lost revenue replacement. At the end of the year, there was just over $5 million, which represents about 3.9 months of budgeted expenditures for the 2023 year. So you're in a better cash ending position than you had been in recent years as far as looking at what's in reserves as looking at the next year's budget. In the 2023 year, the borough budgeted for the use of $980,000, so it's anticipated that that $5 million will be reduced at the end of next year. Then looking at the water and sewer and refuse funds, overall those are in good fund balance positions as well, with 12, 7, and 4 months of the next year's budgeted expenditures in ending fund balance. The water fund had budgeted for a $66,000 surplus. Actual results was $274,000 for the year. Sewer budgeted for $558,000 deficit. Actual results was $348,000 deficit, while refuse budgeted for $145,000 deficit, and the actual results was a $4,000 deficit. So all those came in better than what was budget anticipation for the year for those funds.
Is there a municipal benchmark for how many months worth of cash should be on hand?
So a lot of it depends on what your capital projects is the biggest cost for any municipality, and so a lot of it depends on what's upcoming, what's the long-term capital plan. Just a general base mark, you want to see at least 3 months of expenditures on hand. Generally what we see, I would say a rough range is 3 to 6 months within the general fund. So you also have debt that you can take out if you have, with significant capital projects, if you don't have that cash on hand. Many municipalities already have debt. You're one of the few that has no debt on the books that I would see. So a lot of it comes into play, but generally where you are currently is in a good position. When we were looking back at the 2020 year, you were much lower than what we would recommend. So lastly, we have some communication just general audit communication letters. Within the management letter, there was no internal control issues or policy recommendations that we had through our audit. We do have just one consideration item. Can you go to the management letter? So the one consideration item is in relation to the reporting of benefits. So there's 2 acceptable methods under DCD reporting. The current method that you utilize is all the benefit costs are reported on a single line item within the respective benefit category, but when they're grouped with the DCD code, it's all in the same DCD coding. The other option is to spread those benefits to the various department codes which they relate to. So looking at health insurance, right now that's all in a single line item versus being spread for, this is police health insurance, this is fire health insurance, this is your public works costs. So there's pros and cons to both methods. With the current method of reporting it all together, you don't see on a recurring basis what the overall police costs are if you just run up the police code. But a con of changing that method is it is a lot more time consuming to set that up, budget for that, getting payroll set up so that it's properly making those allocations throughout the year. And with the staff on hand that you currently have, it would be pretty substantial additional work. So that's why this is more of just a consideration item. We do see it both ways at various municipalities as well. Many of the medium to larger ones do have those allocations in place, but they also have larger business office staff. The main benefit that you would have of having the expenses allocated by department would be when going into police contract negotiations. you would have that cost allocation already there. But as long as you're still able to get that information as far as pulling out, okay, what of this $3.6 million related to police costs, you still have that information available for you to make those financial decisions.
But we've always been able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So, so this recommendation is not a contingency based on accepting the audit.
No, absolutely not. And it's not necessarily a formal recommendation, like, it's to your benefit to do this, it's just a consideration item for.
Why don't we take that
management.
under consideration and we'll have some internal discussions about it and we'll move on from there.
So other than that, within our letters, there was just standard wording within the communication with government. There's no difficulties when performing our audit, and as usual, the proposed entries that we had for the audit were very minimal and nothing else to report. So that's all that I had for the presentation, but if there's any other comments or questions, I will take them.
Good job, Phyllis.
Yes, well done.
I think we're good.
Alright.
So, do we have we need a motion to accept the audit,
So
and we'll
moved.
move it on to council, correct?
So moved.
They've also provided draft statements from which the PowerPoint you presented, Ty. So we're in
Good.
agreement with the
But
information.
you said,
The draft statement was included in the second email received yesterday.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
second.
We have a motion and a second, we'll move this on to recommend to accept the audit for our council. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Council, thank you, Nick.
Thank you. And what is the date of the council meeting?
April 11th.
Are you okay with, do you want drafts at that time, or are you looking for a final?
What do we generally do for that?
We can go to final.
Yeah, it can do the final.
Alright, I'll have to see if we can get that finalized by then.
That's next Tuesday.
Yeah. The last part of the finalization process on our end is we do have a second partner quality review. So I'll have to make sure, I don't know if the holidays, if he'll be able to get to it by then. But if not, you have the draft, there's no anticipated
It's still there. It's-
changes, usually from that review is very minor verbiage items. But I'll let you know either way what we will be able to have.
Since you're still over there working on my taxes, they probably.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, Phyllis.
All right, thanks. At the end of March, cash and investments totaled $10,886,000. It's an increase of $515,000, which is expected as a collection of real estate tax revenues begin. There is no change in the rates for the demand accounts. Of the 10 million, 8 million of that is in Pliget investments. To date, we've earned almost 48,000 in Pliget interest. With the current investments of 8 million, an additional 239 can be expected. Projected bank interest through the end of the year, the remaining 9 months, is 85,000. So it is very likely that our projected interest income will come in close to 400,000 with the current investments. That will give us a variance of 281,000 to start our comparison for the current year variance. There is a maturity occurring on Monday, the 10th, of $2 million. So we are looking for instructions as to reinvestment. The current rates available as of Monday has a 60-day maturity at 4.9. The sweet spot seems to be in the 150 to 180-day range, and you can see when those dates are. So if we are looking to fill in some dates, getting us to a June, which is a month where we have no maturity, we would be at the lower interest rate. There'll be in excess of $1 to $2 million coming in over the next few weeks through April and May. So there is no immediate need.
Right.
So if we wanted to go for terms that have the higher rate, when you get out to like the 360 days, the rates actually go down, and these rates are actually rebounded over the last few weeks. There was an initial decrease following the Silicon Valley issue. None of the Pliget investments were tied to that, but just the overall market condition. So we need to make a decision about the $2 million that is maturing on Monday and consider additional investments of real estate tax collections that won't be needed until capital expenditures occur. So Jim and I did review the timing of some of the projects that are coming up, and I'm not gonna have a lot of large capital expenditures until the May-June timeframe. In May, there'll be about $1 million when we look at the payment apps that are coming due, as well as there's a truck number 24, which will eventually be reimbursed by the DEP grant, but about $1 million in need in May, and then once the street project starts, that will be the next major expenditure, and that start date isn't even on the books yet.
Yeah. Well, we certainly want to take advantage of the 5.18. I guess the question is, do we want to lock in something in the longer term in case the rates start going down?
So if you look at the 270, which is still at 5.18, that would still be a 2023 maturity.
Right.
Anything that's scheduled beyond that would be interest received in '24.
Right.
So it won't
It's
be
a bad
added.
thing,
It's not a bad thing, but it's not interest we can count on for the current year.
Right. Well, you can't really count on that one either because it's at the end of the month and.
Yeah.
So maybe we ought to put $1 million at the December date and put $1 million sometime like in September just to get the 5.18.
Yeah, we can do, the 5.18 is available on anything between 180 days
Right.
and 270 days.
So maybe put one at 180 and one at 270. Split
So
up that $2
I
million.
mean, this was as of Monday, till we mature on Monday the 10th. The December date will most likely fall into '24.
Okay.
So, and anything within that middle range.
Yeah, maybe just then go to the 240 one. One at 240 and one at 180. But then what about some of the tax
Some
revenue?
of
that's
the
coming
extra
in?
stuff, we could pick any of those current year maturity dates, and we'll still have other things maturing in the meantime.
So you feel comfortable with how much in terms of taking current tax dollars?
Initially $1 million. I mean, I don't have the money right now.
Right.
When we look at real estate taxes, you'll see of what was collected in March. Over 400,000 will be an April receipt.
Right.
So I didn't have it at the end of March, but over the next,
So you just want to wait then to talk about the tax revenue
I
a
mean,
little later?
we know it's coming.
Right.
Do we wanna wait until the next meeting to make a decision, or do you wanna?
You know what, we ought to do it.
Yeah.
Dollars coming to that.
Yeah,
And if we're in a pinch, we're gonna put it out.
right. But what we were talking about, in the tax revenue that's not here yet, that's just coming in.
Yeah, you get the most of it in April anyway.
Why don't we see where we are by Tuesday when we have our council meeting?
Okay,
And if there's a significant revenue increase, we can actually just add it on to
I can tell you
financing.
there's, 405,000, 150 of which was received on Monday. The balance is expected next Monday.
Okay,
There's usually about a week lag between the tax collector's deposits and her remitting it to the borough. So she's allowing time for checks to bounce, which unfortunately has become an issue. So she doesn't want to turn it over to the borough and then have the check bounce out of her account.
so why don't we, at least for now, we'll do it and then ratify it at council meeting on Tuesday, since this matures on the 10th, that we take one of the $1 million out of the $2 million and put it for 180 and another one at 240.
Okay,
And then we'll look at where we are with tax revenue on Tuesday
okay,
and just let Michelle know where we are and what your thoughts are before council meeting. And if there's a significant dollar sitting there, we
okay,
can decide at council meeting to do that.
all right.
So do we have a motion to do that? Put $1 million at 180 and $1 million at 240? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. put that on the agenda, then we'll ratify that at council meeting on Tuesday.
Okay, so next is the regular March results. Right, during the month of March, the annual liquid fuels distribution was received from PennDOT in the amount of $363,000, was $6,000 more than the estimate that PennDOT had provided in the fall. Net real estate taxes received by the borough totaled $476,000. Local taxes totaled $776,000. Registrations for our summer programs opened during March, $42,000 was collected, as was the proceeds from the school districts for the sale of the police interceptor and $11,000. Revenues totaled $2,743,000, pretty much on par with last year. A little less than what I had anticipated for the month of March. And some of that has to do with the timing of the real estate tax receipt that came in on Monday rather than the previous Friday, which would have made it a March receipt. Year-to-date basis, revenues totaled $4,987,000, a positive variance versus the prior year of $529,000, and a positive variance versus the estimate of $197,000. Expenses for the month of March included the receipt of the residential meters for the next phase of the water projects. That I believe is the last of the residential phases of this plan. The MMO payment was made in the amount of $69,000 as approved. A payment app was made on the Green Light Go program for $40,000. Equipment was purchased under the police grant totaling $39,000. That will eventually be reimbursed, and that's the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. Yes, thank you. And the fire station retaining wall repair was completed for $14,000. Expenditures totaled $1,723,000. It's a negative variance of $327,000 when compared to last year. And what you see across all the funds is all the contractual rate increases in terms of wages as well as refuse contracts and those things, and those will continue to accumulate throughout the year. Year-to-date expenses total $5,012,000, a negative variance versus the prior year of $655,000, but a positive variance over what had been expected for the month of March of $27,000. On a net basis, for the month of March, revenues exceeded expenses by $1,019,000, less than last year. Again, that goes to the delay in the real estate tax receipt from the tax collector. A negative variance versus what was expected for the month of March as well. On a year-to-date basis, the March excess reduces the year-to-date deficit to $24,000. That is a variance versus the prior year of $126,000, but a positive variance over what had been projected for the month of March. When that $24,000 deficit is added to the beginning of the year fund balance, the overall fund balance is $11,961,000. And I should note that this is different than what was distributed yesterday. I had located a formula error in what had been distributed and corrected that last night. So with an overall balance of $11,961,000, reserves of $1.9 million, the unreserved fund balance at the end of March is $10,005,000. If we were to add the open permits to that, that would bring it to $10,012,000. Already included in fund balance is $1,072,000 of open receivables. In addition to the general fund, the end of March would have been the large utility billing that went out. The reserves at the end of March total $1.9 million. Added during the month of March was $10 million for the MS4 reserve, which brings that total balance up to $420. In addition to the payment app that was made on Green Light Go, there were some engineering costs incurred for a total of $41,000. I've highlighted the very bottom line to point out that we had reserved the borough's match on the Stonehouse project, and Michelle was notified, just a few weeks ago that that award, has been made, so we now have $460,000. I point this out that even though it's reserved, it's not a project that we budgeted for the current year. So neither the expense of $589 nor the grant revenue of $460 is included in the current year budget. This was an approach where we agreed that once the funding was awarded, we would revisit the project to determine whether we wanted to add it to the current year budget or not. And I understand by the terms of the grant, we do have some flexibility as to timing.
So what's our
Michelle,
thought on that?
do you wanna add?
Trying to get that in the schedule for this year between the 4th of July parade, the runnels that are already scheduled for the Stonehouse would likely not be a good idea. We have 2 years from, receipt of the grant award to move forward with the project and can ask for additional time extensions. So my recommendation would be to talk to Public Works and look at including that as a bid item as part of next year's streets project. And go from there, do it in 24. That way we can look at working it around the 4th of July parade, blocking out the Stonehouse for rentals, that we know that time period is not available.
Cause I know
And
there's,
likely we'll be doing the pedestrian bridge at the same time next year, so you can kind of just shut down that whole area, do everything at once, and get it over with.
from a financial standpoint, it should be a wash, we shouldn't have any,
Well, the
The
borough's
match.
match will be $129,000.
they'll be already reserved for
Which
that.
we've reserved,
Right.
but as I said, it's not included in the current year budget
Right,
numbers.
understood. I guess infrastructure should make sure that they review that again to make sure that there hasn't been any change of heart in terms of the, design and so on, since we have new council members that. were
Yeah, I'm not,
on.
very,
When-
I'm not very familiar.
I was actually going to talk to the 3 new council members sitting here after the meeting about setting up.
I think you sent it out to them though, right?
Yes.
Didn't- She sent
Yes.
out the plan.
Except I couldn't get the last page, of the document for some reason.
Congratulations, and notice you didn't get last week. Not everybody will get that far.
Whoa, man.
Dave's retired, he's got nothing.
Yeah. No, actually, I just.
I just think they should have the opportunity to have input just to make sure that,
Yeah, yeah.
I was actually gonna attempt to schedule a meeting with the 3 of them for the next week or so, to not just go over that grant, but all of the pending grants and ones that were awarded and done in 2021.
okay, anybody have any questions on the reserves?
To review the current year variances, my plan is to continually update the projected interest variance as we make additional investments and we watch what's happening with the demand account, currently at $281,000. We also have ongoing expenses related to the civil service issue. Currently, that's been an unplanned expense of $14,000. For the month of March, as you know, the street contract was awarded $105,000 over budget. There was a change order approved for the water project to add a hydrant at a specific location for $11,000. Firewall appliances for security issues for the computer system that were not included in the original budget totaled about $14,000. The the fire station retaining wall actually has been completed and came in $7,000 under the $22,000 that had been originally budgeted. We previously had estimated the overtime savings from the mild winter to be about $40,000. The infrastructure committee approved tabling the plan to paint all of the street lines in the borough. Of the 95 that was originally budgeted, it's estimated that only about 15 is needed. So there would be 80,000 as a positive budget variance. I caution, however, and have it highlighted because it's not funds that's available for general use. There are specific approved expenses that the liquid fuel funds can be used for. There was some discussion about using it for some lighting repairs that is needed. After investigation and discussion with Jim McCarthy and Jim Babb, that might not be the best course of action, and I'll explain why. So there is lighting repairs needed that are estimated to be about $25,000.
These are highway, this is the highway lighting, to clarify.
So this is outside the green light go scope. The current estimate is $25,000. 15 of that is equipment The time and material piece of this, which we're estimating at 10, is an unknown number, but the project scope is at least 25,000. So that takes it in the liquid fuels arena into something that would need to be bid. And for it to be bid, then we have to incur engineering costs on top of those costs. We currently have a maintenance agreement in place with PennDOT that for repairs to fixtures in this one particular geographic area, we have a 50% reimbursement from PennDOT. So if the project were to be 25,000, we will be reimbursed by PennDOT under the maintenance agreement, the highway lighting maintenance agreement, for approximately 12,500. That would leave the cost to the borough of the other half, or 12,500. The question would be, do we want to fund it with general funds, or if do we want to jump through the liquid fuels hoop to use the liquid fuels funds?
Can we
So-
not use the liquid fuels to offset some of the overages on the streets?
We're getting into,
You know, once you get into construction issues with liquid fuels funds, there's extensive inspections and reviews that are required. And many years ago, we did use liquid fuels funds for road projects. Then they would come in and change specs and
we ended up ripping out
degrees on ramps
a
and.
lot of things.
So we specifically looked for qualified expenses that would avoid that whole inspection process. And that's how we decided on purchase of the bulk salt for the streets, for the electric, for the street lighting, and for the line painting. So that PennDOT inspections weren't holding up our process. Another unique characteristic of the liquid fuels fund is that we get one annual distribution that always comes in March, as it did this year. When we look at what was planned for the liquid fuels fund, we had actually thought that we were going to end the year with a fund balance of just 35,000. So if we were with a fund balance at the end of '23 of just 34,000, it would not be adequate to cover the street lighting for January and February of 2024. So we have been gradually depleting this fund. By not spending those funds on the line painting, we actually makes its fund balance a little bit stronger. So in this year, I was down to 29,000 in anticipation of the March distribution to pay the electric bill. So I prefer to see those funds there, that we're not down to depleting the fund to pay the electric bill. So I'm not anxious to search for something that we would incur additional engineering fees for and inspections for, where we're actually depleting that fund on a year-to-year basis.
So why don't we just take it off this list and just put it in your fund balance and
That would be my preference, but we did explore different ways to use it for this interchange problem.
sounds like we're better off just.
Jim McCarthy suggested, could we just do the equipment part of it, leave the time and materials out of it, which would take it out of the bidding threshold category. But then if you were to use it for just equipment, it's in a range where you have to not get one quote, but you have to get 3 quotes. And there's not 3 vendors out there. I mean, Telco's pretty much the vendor. To get other vendors involved who are not familiar with the area, again, we would be incurring engineering fees so that we could even ask for a quote.
Yeah, it's not working.
Long-winded explanation to explain just leaving the 80,000 in legal fuels.
So yeah, just leave it alone until it's just taken off this list, so
Okay.
it's not confusing.
All right, so of the projected interest variance of 281,000, 72 would remain in the general fund for additional variances for the current year. Any questions on the current year variances? No? All right, just a quick recap of where we are on our capital projects. We're still holding the retainage on the sidewalk program from last year. That restoration is anticipated in the next few weeks and will likely be in front of the May infrastructure possibly. That's a guess on timing. During the month of March, payment was made on application number 2 to Telco for the Greenlight Go program in the amount of $40,000. Application number 3 is pending the infrastructure committee review next week or 2 weeks in the amount of $316,000. That would be before the May council for approval and will be part of that $1 million that will be needed during May. On the water project that is substantially completed this time, the retainage has been reduced to 5%. So there's one payment app that is pending the infrastructure committee's approval for a total of $289,000. The only change to the sewer work thus far is the change in the scope of the current year televising and repair. Jim has gone through that and made necessary reductions, so we will be closer to the $400,000 budget. There was no other additional expenditures related to sewer during the month of March. So total capital expenditures, in addition to the payment for the retaining wall, the Greenlight Go expenditures, there's additional site expenses incurred at the pole barn site, $4,000, and additional engineering costs for the Berkshire Boulevard pump station. Current capital expenditures totaled $60,000 for a year-to-date total of $141,000. So clearly, the bigger numbers are yet to come. Real estate tax collection. Bills went out based on an assessed value of $1,049,000,000. Potential collectible taxes is $4,723,000. So far, just one reduction has been recorded for a military exoneration, and that reduced the collectible tax by just $1,000. The tax collector reports collections totaling $886,000, 18%, which is trending a little bit higher than previous years. Of that $886,000, as I mentioned, $405,000 will actually be an April receipt. Part of it was received on Monday, the next part is expected next Monday. So the gross real estate taxes collected by the borough during the month of March from the tax collector's efforts was $481,000. When that amount is netted down by the early payment discounts of $9,000, and you add the $4,000 that was collected by the county, the net real estate taxes for the month of March total $476,000, a negative variance when compared to the prior year, as well as a negative variance compared to my projection for the month of March. And again, that has to do with the timing of that check I received on Monday. A day earlier would have been a March receipt. On a year-to-date basis, net real estate taxes total $541,000. A negative variance both compared to the prior year as well as to the first quarter estimate. Local taxes for the month of March totaled $776,000, a negative variance compared to the prior year as well as to the March estimate. On a year-to-date basis, local taxes total $1,124,000, a negative variance compared to prior year as well as to the March estimate. What I'm finding the most concern would be the sluggish activity in the real estate tax transfers. But if we get those 1 or 2 commercial properties, that could change quickly.
I know of at least one that is under agreement and expected to go to settlement late April, early May, and the sale price is close to $10 million.
The bigger concern is the sluggishness in the earned income tax. We just continue to fall behind there. For the month of March, $485,000 was collected, where you can see the prior years were closer to $600,000. I've already received the April deposit of $120,000, and we fell further behind. Now we're $111,000 behind compared to prior year. So that is a concern. Offset by what we're seeing in the mercantile tax. In the month of March, $162,000 was collected. And I'm cautiously optimistic there because it could just be a matter of timing. If people are filing their tax returns earlier than before, that might not necessarily indicate that we're going to get a lot more tax. The better indicator would be in May, when we're receiving collections following the April 15th due date. So just as earned income tax is falling behind, local services taxes likewise, and in the month of March, 100,000 was received, already received the April distribution of just 700, so we have a year-to-date total of 137,000. Any questions on the March results?
Done?
Okay, hearing none. Number 7,
This is coming out of the personnel committee. I have presented 2 proposals for anti-harassment and workplace civility training for all borough employees, including part-time summer staff. The proposal that was provided by Hubrick Resources, who does this similar training for West Riding and other municipalities, was included the personnel committee, and I were recommending the finance committee recommend to council moving forward with. The cost for the training is $2,025, which does include a discount. This will be presented to employees both in person, and they will give us a video recording of the training, so we don't have to schedule fire department or police officers to come in on overtime. Same way we could do it for the summer staff, we can just almost set up like a movie screen like this and play it for them at their actual location. And then something else Melissa and I are working on is updating the employee handbook. Hubrick updated West Reading's last year. Dean Murray was kind enough to give me a copy of that, so we're Melissa and I are going through page by page, making our suggested revisions. When we're done with it, Chris will review it. When Chris is done reviewing it, we will then send it back to Hubrick for their final touches to come back to personnel for potential adoption.
Any thoughts, comments, discussion?
Good idea.
We'll move it on to council.
Will the personnel committee get it reviewed before?
The handbook?
Yeah.
Yes.
is there a
Okay.
motion? Yeah, you didn't need a motion, right?
I'll make a motion to pass this.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move it on to council with a recommendation from finance administration to move forward. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Pioneer Crossing,
Phyllis gave me a heads up last year that the current lease agreement for airspace at the Pioneer Crossing landfill expires at the end of 2023. When Jane Meeks from the county was kind enough to assist with our refuse and recycling bid last year, she also gave me a heads up if and when we wanted to look at our lease arrangement, terminate it, and put that lease out to bid. She was aware that Kenhurst Borough had gotten a significant reduction on their rates when they put theirs out to bid in 2020. So I reached out to her a few weeks ago. She was kind enough to put a draft together that I know Chris has one minor comment on, which is about we just need to indicate in the bid documents the time and place of the bid opening. We would do this through pen bid, the same way we do all of our other street sewer water projects. We also need to notify Pioneer 180 days in advance of the current lease expiring at the end of the year that we intend to terminate. Jane has told me there are what she expects 4 other landfills that would likely bid in addition to Pioneer on this contract, so I don't see what the harm is in putting it out there and seeing if competition gets us a better price.
what's our annual expenditure for this?
Well, right now it's roughly $92 a ton. I couldn't tell you the annual.
Not in.
The price Kenhurst got, they're currently at $72. Now again, that was a 2020 bid, so things could have changed since then, but again, I don't think it hurts to see what else is out there.
15 to 20% reduction.
I have a
The annual
question,
budget.
Michelle.
Yes, Chris?
Yeah, our collection contract.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, yep.
Must have a transportation component for delivery to a landfill. If we have 4 different landfills competing, there's different distances to the borough. I'm wondering if there's any terms in the collection contract that would, require us to go to Pioneer or would require some adjustment in the transportation costs for the waste. So they just wanna make sure that we have all the costs that will be affected by changing this, disposal contract. But anyway, it's more of a comment than, I don't expect you to have an answer right now.
I actually talked to Jane about that. 3 of the potential bidders, are the same distance or closer from the borough than Pioneer. So that might actually be a potential cost savings as well. 2 of them are almost double the distance, though she doesn't, it's not that she doesn't expect them to bid, but I mean, we both were talking through, we would need to go back to JP Mascaro as our caller to talk about the contract language in the refuse and recycling contract and revising that to indicate it wouldn't be going to Pioneer, it would be going to someone else depending who the low bidder is.
Okay, well, we wanna try to capture any savings if the contract allows us to do that. All right, thank you.
The annual budget for disposal is $273,000.
So what do you need?
Motion to recommend council approve sending notice to Pioneer to terminate effective as of December 31st, 2023, and then motion to bid the contract for landfill airspace after 2023.
We have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. A motion and a second to recommend to council that we move forward with terminating the contract, giving them notice for termination of the contract, and then rebidding it. You'll probably rebid that when, like,
May, June,
yeah. And then it's a 5-year term.
that's how it's worded in there. The current lease agreement we have was, I believe, for a 5-year term with the option to no, I'm sorry, it was a 10-year lease with the option to extend for another 10 years.
So we have a motion and a second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, move that on. National opioid settlement. From what I read, it doesn't sound like it's worth doing,
There's no cost to us.
but I thought there was a cost
I-
associated with
I received an email, a random email. I honestly don't even know how I got on the email list. What the email says is there's a new proposed national opioid settlement with Teva, Allergen, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. Based upon subdivision participation forms received on or before April 18th, the subdivision participation rate will be used to determine whether participation for each deal is sufficient for the settlement to move forward or whether a state earns its maximum potential payment. So I believe we had participated in one of these around 2020, 2021. I don't, to my knowledge, know that we ever received any money because I believe at that time the potential payment was made to the state because of the number of participants. So how this works is if we indicate we wanna participate in all 5 and the number of subdivisions, political subdivisions that wanna participate meets the threshold, it goes one of 2 ways. It's either enough that it all goes to the state or it's not enough that it goes to the individual municipalities. So if it goes to the state, we're not getting anything directly unless it's funneled down through the state and other grant programs. If that threshold is not met, any political subdivision that submitted the paperwork to participate would get direct payment.
Why do I think we got $200? And, yeah, I mean, that's all it was like 200, but I don't know if that came from the state or direct, I forget where that came from.
Pat was involved in this, that's why I believe it
Yeah,
was
There was one a
2020,
couple years ago,
2021.
based on a,
I think it was the chemical company family, DuPont.
yeah,
I
and
don't
it's,
recall.
there's been other
I
ones
didn't receive
for
it.
different drugs, this is gonna pop up all over the place.
Yeah, and actually, there's another one that was just publicized last week.
So, I mean, all this is me going through and docu-signing these forms,
So your recommendation, you wanna do this?
doesn't hurt.
That's all you have to do, just sign the documents, you don't have to do any reporting or.
So, do we have a motion to put this on to authorize it to council next week?
So moved.
Motion and a
Second.
second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
And you can cover another lunch.
Is there any old business to be brought before the committee?
Yeah.
Hearing none, is there any new business to be brought before the committee?
Keith, I just wanted to ask the committee about their reporting preferences going forward. I had emailed you, the financial results that are typically distributed in the council packages. It contains a fund summary as well as hundreds of lines of detail.
Right.
That information is provided and will continue to be provided to the department heads, because they track individual lines within their departments. Keith and I, have worked through the detail of consolidating that information, to more meaningful categories that roughly correspond to what we report up to the state, which Herbine will do for us in their DCED reporting. So the question I have is, what information is meaningful to you as council members? What are you interested in seeing in the council package? I wonder, with the detail that's provided, even though it's electronic, how many people actually spend time looking through 16 pages of detail? Or is the condensed version that I sent more meaningful to you?
I'm
So
fine
it's
with the
open.
condensed version, just because it's so much detail, you almost lose the effect of it.
Yeah.
I think the consolidated, reports are more meaningful, and for me, if I see something, then we can ask for more detail. But I think the consolidated condensed version is
I lost-
Is this just for council, consolidated?
Yeah, we have never talked on the detail
Right.
level at the committee level. But
You
we-
send them, I forget, because I looked at it late last night, but you sent both to this committee, you sent.
I sent both
Okay, 'cause you
versions
sent
to
them to
the
me, I didn't know.
committee. So this is what is usually sent.
It's pages and pages of scrolling.
Right, but it would want not only the committee, but also you CC councils on.
Yeah, yeah, everyone is
So
included.
everybody
on-
has.
So there's a prior year
Oh, okay.
comparison and then fund by fund, pages and pages of information. The consolidated version,
That turned out to be 16.
if it,
So I printed
well,
that one
but
there.
there's room for me to put multiple departments on a page now.
Right, Right,
So
which is
I
paper.
could condense the paper as well, even though we're not printing them. So this is a condensed summary, and it really does pull everything into just a few lines.
I just can't imagine anybody's really spending a lot of time going, I mean, Tom Boucher's not here anymore, so he's not going through the books
Checks.
anymore.
The
only the checks.
Yeah.
the line I struggled with, I was trying to provide a meaningful wage number.
Yep.
And where I ran into difficulty was with the public works wages, because they don't appear on just one line in the public works department, they appear on 36 lines, as well as lines within the rec department, and lines within the water department, and the sewer department, and then you pull away, if I were to extract that information to put it on a wage line, it would distract from the total cost of the street maintenance and the total cost of water operations and so forth. So it became problematic pulling wages. So what you're seeing at that top line of expenses isn't the overall payroll. And if I were to develop a way to pull those over, the wages wouldn't have been budgeted accordingly. We have a lot of expense budget lines that have a blend of borough wages and outside vendors. The best example of that is reading the water meters. We do have wages paid to borough staff to read water meters. We also pay Pennsylvania American Water to provide meter readings to us for that portion of the borough. So that is a single budget line to read water meters. The budget is billed for one line. There's not a separate budget for how much are we gonna pay borough staff and how much are we gonna pay. So line by line, we'd have to, after we've taken the time to consolidate, we'd have to expand everything. So, that's my only caution. I wasn't happy with the end result of that wage line.
I think we can live with that. So anybody have any comments or be okay with the consolidated form?
I personally, when I look at budget versus actual, I'm concerned about this year. I think muddying it with prior years, I don't know if it's worth it, but that's just personal preference.
I like the prior year only
As a
because
reference.
the budget is a moving target and it's
Yeah.
pretty much a guess as opposed to a real, it's Phyllis's best guess. To me, I think if you look at the two numbers, prior year also tells you where you are, assuming it's the same type of year unless you have been COVID.
But then that raises the question, why are we different from last year? I'd be more concerned, why are we different this year? You know, but it's personal
Yeah.
preference, there's
I
certainly
don't-
nothing wrong with it.
So having it on there, I don't think hurts it.
Okay, that's
However you
fine.
wanna look at it.
It just would make it less busy, but you're right, just a couple
Oh,
columns.
yeah, these worksheets have really
Grown.
blown up.
Yes.
With a number of links and vertical lookups and copying
Right.
and pasting and.
It would make it a lot simpler, but that, again, that's just a personal opinion, no big deal.
So on a monthly basis, in the council package that Melissa distributes, you would be interested in looking at this condensed version rather than the detail?
I think so.
Okay.
For council, yes, absolutely.
I don't think we can see all the checks, like, I know that came up a couple of years ago, about seeing all the checks, we can see all the checks for this meeting, for one or two,
Well,
but.
It's
I mean,
approval
all I can tell you
after
is you get that email, you send me that email, and I can't even like forward it to another email because it's so god darn big.
Yeah.
and that's why I split what I sent yesterday into two emails.
I agree
The-
with
the-
that.
the review- I often puzzled over the review of the checklist because those checks are gone in cash
Right,
by the time you're looking at them. But
After the fact.
and it's all reported in via the budget and the expenses, so, I mean, I think it's something that if someone particular has a question on, so be it, but, you know, all I do is look at what the health insurance cost is every month and try not to throw up, and then
well, see, you're gonna lose your health insurance cost in this condensed version.
it's fine.
I'll stop throwing up.
That's a good question. Why do you-
I mean, we know what it costs, it's just, yeah, it's the number in there, I don't,
Be reminded.
yeah.
So going forward, for Melissa to distribute the package, I'm just gonna provide her with this condensed version.
Fine.
Okay. Are you interested in continuing to receive that checklist?
I personally would look at it. I mean, what's the committee's thoughts?
Must that be approved, the checklist, don't we have to
It
approve?
has been, Fred
Pass-
Vogel brought that up, that really we should, take a roll call vote on
Right,
that
to
list.
approve that, to
And
approve
Chris,
those payments.
Chris, are you still there? Pardon?
Bueller?
Yeah,
You know,
I,
he,
I am here, I was muted.
okay,
he was sweet.
Chris,
That's weird.
on those checks, when Fred Mogul had brought up on our payables that Fred thought we should have a, roll call vote to approve, and you agreed with him. Now we're looking at maybe doing away with just having that report. What's your thought?
Well, you don't have to have that report in order to have the motion stated as Fred is suggesting. I mean, you can still have a roll call vote approving payments without having the detailed report attached to the bank.
If we're approving payments that have already been paid.
Still growing.
That's right, yeah, it's a formality, it's a formality I would still recommend the council take action on.
So, Chris,
Yeah.
what would happen if for some reason council didn't vote to approve that and the check's already been cut and cashed?
Well, you have authority to pay recurring bills during the course of the month. I mean, so we've always been paying bills in advance of council's approval of that report. But that report is basically a ratification of all the payments that have been made during the course of the month.
Agreed, just that would get interesting if for some reason it wasn't approved, because again, the check's already been cut and cashed.
But those are mostly recurring bills, the ones that are special, like the highways and they're all voted on and not paid until
Yeah.
approved.
The budget is.
No, that's true. I mean,
The
the
payment
ones that are
application.
prepaid are the ones that are recurring. The ones that are paid after the council meeting are the ones that are more unique.
Yes and no, I mean, I feel like in years past, the questions that would come up at council regarding specific payments were not ones that would have gone through, like they were food reimbursements or, you know, what's this for? So, not always, but generally yes.
Could you have, and again, but could you have that payment list looked at by the treasurer or somebody instead of the whole committee?
He does as,
Treasurer's
part-
signs
we
it.
both,
Treasurer signs every one of them.
yeah.
No, yeah, but I mean the list, but you're right, each signed the
Yeah,
list.
if I see something that I don't like,
Right,
kind of,
right.
I pull it out.
And there's 2 signatures
sign it.
required, so.
Yeah. Yeah, Michelle signs,
And I'm reviewing them, well, first the department head reviews them, then they all come to me to review and sign off on, and then the check's cut and goes Tom and I sign.
I
Right.
review everything.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, by the time my signature goes on there, it's been reviewed 4 times.
Right.
What's that?
And we can save a tree. That's happened once, that I went to sign a check. That's what we talked about.
It's printed out.
And ultimately, did you?
All right, so we're okay with that?
Ultimately, did you sign
But
it?
We're trying not to make it voluminous, Chris.
Everybody knows.
eliminate that list, the checklist.
One final thing, just to follow up, Steve brought it up again also with the Herbine recommendation. To give Phyllis the clarity on that, we're not going to take their recommendation in terms of splitting out the health insurance.
It is information that's available and has always been provided to the
And you can get it
negotiation.
when we need it,
Yes.
Yeah,
right?
you
So
got it.
there's no reason to
When you
add
get,
that.
when you
Allocate
get, when you
and
get the health
allocate,
insurance
yes.
bills, it
Yeah,
just
I agree.
listed 50 people on the plan.
The detail is listed, but we still enter the payable as one single line item.
So
But
they
I-
break it out, they break out the bill by,
By person,
By person.
by person and
well, I
whether they,
understand that, but
what
you
PPO
can, you
they
could
have.
have Benetcon if you wished. Bill
Group
you
them.
subgroups, so if the group is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you'd have group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -1, -2,
Yes.
-3, -4, and you could break it up and put people in the right spots.
Right
if you
now,
want
they're
that.
grouped by coverage, which is meaningful when the rates change.
Sure, rates change once a year though.
Right,
But the-
but again, Public Works is what's
I'm
probably.
not saying you have to do it, I'm just saying
I'm
you
saying-
have that ability to ask them to do it, if you wanted.
We could, but, Public Works was to be problem. Where are you gonna code the Public Works healthcare?
I would just say you could get a list of the public works employees and just have them in one subcategory.
Mhm.
It doesn't change the health insurance at all, it doesn't,
Right.
it's just on your bill, it'll say this is public, or this is group of 3. I don't really could care less if you do it or not, but it just, you have that ability to do it.
You do have it.
Yeah, and that percentage basically is pretty much the same over all the different groups, isn't it?
No.
A percentage, does it change that much between groups?
Contracts.
Contract
Employee
negotiation.
contribution.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, contract would make a difference, okay.
If we're going to change how we vote on the checks, do we have to retroactively approve payments made in the past because it was not done by roll call?
Chris, did you hear that?
Well, no, I didn't hear it all. I mean, I do believe the council has a responsibility to have a motion in the minutes that you've paid, that you've approved the payments. I mean, that's part of council's responsibility, so, you know, you can delegate the review of bills, you can delegate the signing of checks, but at some point in the process, at council meetings, there has to be a motion to approve the payments.
So we're not suggesting that we change the way we're doing it at this point.
My suggestion to Melissa was just to have a standing agenda item, motion
Yeah.
required to approve,
We have that now.
ratify.
We have that now, don't
Yeah, I guess it is on there.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the package,
So-
yes.
we? Yeah.
Right, the question, was it roll call before, was it?
I don't
No.
think we're suggesting a
It never,
change.
no, we never did a roll call, we always did it as a blanket thing, and council approved. If that's what Fred is saying,
Well, and that's, you're technically spending money, so you technically should be doing a roll call.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the only change that I think is appropriate would be to do it by roll call instead of by,
Janet's question is, do we have to go back and do anything to ratify what we've done in the past to change the
No,
procedure
no.
going forward?
don't go back.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have anything for the good of the committee? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Steve.
Yeah.